Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. This is your co-host Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. And we are finishing up our series today on penetration testing. Hope you've learned some from the previous episodes. We talked a lot about different types of pen tests, qualities, factors, and considerations. So we will continue to dive a little bit deeper today. And as such, we are going to do a very brief overview of the news and exploits so we can dive right into the topic of penetration testing. Mike?
Thanks, Zach. So just got 4 quick headlines for you today. First headline is that billions of records have been hacked already. Make cybersecurity a priority or risk disaster, warns an analyst. Basically, there's been 55 billion data records that have been compromised since 2005. However, in the last year alone, for 2021, 31 billion data records have been compromised. That's up 171% from the previous year, so it's getting worse. New bugs could let hackers bypass Spectre attack mitigations on Linux systems. They found 2 new vulnerabilities on Linux-based operating systems that, if successful, exploited, could let attackers circumvent mitigations for speculative attacks such as Spectre. They're CVE 2020-27170 and CVE 2020-27171. This I put in here because I couldn't resist. Ziggy ransomware admin announced it will refund victims who paid the ransom. Victims that paid the ransom should contact the group by email. Yeah. At ziggyransomware@secmail.pro to be refunded in about 2 weeks. Victims have to provide the payment receipt and the computer's unique ID. So, yeah, I'd never thought I'd see that. Anyway, Microsoft Exchange attacks increase while WannaCry gets a restart. Yep, WannaCry is back. The company saw a 57% rise in ransomware attacks over the past 6 months at a global level. There's a constant monthly increase of 9% since the beginning of the year. We thought 2020 was bad from a year perspective. Looks like 2021 is going to be bad from a tech perspective as far as attacks go.
It's going to make you want to cry.
Exactly.
I cannot believe they're giving money back. I don't know if this change of heart should warrant some kindness from us, but maybe not. For exploits this week, we've just got one. The VS FTP-D product that offers secure and fast FTP server for Unix-like systems has a remote denial of service, which is really interesting. So there is a really, really cool Python 3 script that was developed, and it will DDoS your FTP service. So make sure if you've got VSFTPD running that you're upgrading to version 3.04 or greater. And that is it for exploits this week.
Great, thank you both. Well, I'm excited about my refund. We've heard about ransomware customer service improving over time, but this is next level.
Yeah. Do you want your money back in Monopoly money, or would you prefer cash? You want Boomer paper?
Yeah. It's just interesting that they want the receipt, It's like, but the other part of the article wanted to say that, they're not being all that altruistic. Basically, they got paid in Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's value has gone up so much. So they're like, yeah, we can refund the original amount and take the skim off the top. So basically,
sure, they still make money.
Yeah.
I still don't believe it, but we'll see. Well, let's talk about pen testing and answer everybody's burning questions. How does that sound?
Sure.
Good. Well,
put some fire out.
Yeah. We've covered it a lot over the last few episodes as far as just considerations and such go. And I think behind all this, people are probably starting to see that you could look at it as kind of a good, better, best approach, right? So there's no one size fits all. There's not necessarily a right answer. And people are going to try to sell you all kinds of stuff. So that being said, I can say with almost certainty that kind of commoditized rinse and repeat canned approach is most of the time not very beneficial. But then beyond that, there are varying levels. So one of the one of the questions that we get a lot is around manual penetration testing versus automated. And I think a lot of people from outside the industry, at no fault of their own, but they've heard this thing about, oh, your pen test needs to be manual. And so they ask, oh, is it manual, or what percentage of manual work is done, without fully understanding what that means. Of course, there's a bunch of great information about this in the book. But Laura, do you want to dive in a little bit and kind of explain your theory on this and what's what, and is there a better option on one side or the other?
Sure, Zach. I think there's a lot of convolution around these terms that are getting. I think they get thrown around, indiscretionally, and it doesn't help anybody. So let's talk about when someone asks you, if you're a cybersecurity professional or you're owning a business and you're getting a questionnaire or something, and they said, did you do a manual test or a automated test? What they probably are asking you is, did you get a tool to run a series of tests, or a scan? Basically, did you get an automated scan from one of your tools or technologies, or did you actually assign a third party with a human resource that had tools and techniques at their disposal in order to conduct the test? I think that's really where the mustard meets the bread, right? I think when someone gets questioned that, when I say, hey, did you do a manual or an automated? I think that's probably what they're trying to ascertain is, did you get a printout from a tool, or did you actually have a knowledgeable, accredited, certified practitioner conduct the test? Now, let's look at the terms in general, how they apply to penetration testing as the job would entail, right? From my perspective. And we do talk about this in the book. I think it's quite comical to me, so I'll try to leave my humor aside for the moment. But and in the book I talk about this, and I also use the analogy of changing your tires. Okay, and so if I were to change my tires manually, I would need to take the lug nuts with my fingers and undo them, right? If I'm going to use an automated approach, well, then I'm going to then technically take the impact wrench or even a manual crescent wrench, and I'm going to loosen those lug nuts, right? Now, some people would still say that that's a manual approach, right? Because I'm manually exerting work. It's just a kind of a backed off stage of manual, right? How manual do you want to get? Reference an automated would be if I had, a tire company or maybe a mobile tire company just come to my house and do my tires for me, right? And all I had to do was swipe my card and that's it. That was what I would consider to be an automated tire change. So when we're in the world of pen testing, okay, we're going to use tools to our disposal. It's like I have the impact wrench sitting there. Why am I going to try to take off the lug nuts with my fingers just so I can prove a point that I'm really strong and my bones don't break when I try to undo this? It's going to be impossible, right? If there's 100 foot-pounds of torque on the bolt. And the same in pen testing work. It's going to take fundamentally longer for me to do a bunch of Nmap scans and a bunch of manual MSF, open MSF exploit validation, especially if we're talking about like a Class C, right? A Class C subnet, 254 hosts that we need to check. Okay, why would I cost my client more money in saying that this testing period, because I have to do everything manually, right, quote unquote, is going to take me 700 hours to do, versus if I use the tools at my disposal that automation and intelligent IT has given us over the years to cut that time down and still be able to get the same type of data. So we're going to do a blend of both, right? As the term goes. I'm going to use automated techniques because they're fast and they deliver information quickly. I don't have to wait around for them. But I'm also going to do manual tasks like validating that the vulnerability is actually a vulnerability and provides some form of an attack surface and is not just a misconfiguration that you need to patch. There's a complete difference between an exploitable vulnerability and a vulnerability that's simply a misconfiguration. So we're going to do that manual validation. We're also going to do manual tasks around like web app calls and things like that. We're going to get in the command line and do curl things, right? We're going to maybe write Python scripts. That's going to be some manual tasks to support other automated tasks, right? I'm going to spend some time manually creating the script, but when I push the button, it's going to run. right? So there are a blend of both that's going to happen. And so I kind of think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding in the industry about what this term means, and also how it's applied in actual penetration testing work versus what may be asked in a questionnaire or by a human in conversation about a business connecting, right? And proof of a technical assessment of penetration test being conducted, and if it followed NIST protocol, right? And I think that's really what they're trying to get at. Mike, you got anything?
Yeah, I think there's just so many nebulous terms out there that the standard just really isn't defined, and NIST is as close as we get. And so the problem is that on a lot of times the people requesting it don't have a full grasp of what they really need. Not anybody that's listening to this podcast, of course, because you're all intelligent human beings, but you know, a lot of people out there just don't know what they really want or need. So you've got somebody in the sales side who throws a bunch of technical jargons out there that sound really cool, and they say, okay, great, that's commoditized, it's, you know, within my budget, and that works, and they wind up with a scam as opposed to a pen test. So I think the problem is that, you know, we don't have a terminology, a glossary that mixes. You know, we've all moved to company where one of the first things you get is access to the lexicon, so you understand what everybody's talking about, because each company has their own language in certain things. So, but yeah, I mean, standards would be nice. NIST is as close as we get to a standard, but you know, again, we have different terms that have evolved over the years. And if you've been around as long as I have, you've seen terms come and go and change, and
the building of the pyramids, the creation of the wheel, lots of
exactly. You know, when we made those first computers out of stone, you know,
that's when it was all manual pen testing.
It was all manual.
Yeah.
But yeah, nowadays, if somebody tells you they do 100% manual run because they still haven't completed their first pen test that they started working on 15 years ago, because that's what it would take, right? I mean, you have to use tools, but that doesn't mean it's an automated pen test. I mean, imagine if you try to, what does Metasploit have in it? Like something like 4,000 exploits or something at any given time. I mean, if you tried to run every single one of those yourself without a tool, that would be your career right there.
It would be. It would take too long. And so I think that, to me, this spawned out of sales, right? Where they were trying to ramp prices based on terminology. It's like, well, we can sell you an automated test for this or a manual test for this, right? And I see that that's typically where a lot of the new terminology is coming from. Yeah, is really just around that, I hate to say Bernaysian marketing paradigm, right? Where they're trying to use words that create a different response in the human. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really hold ground to any practitioners who do this work, because that's the beauty of automation. That's the beauty of technology, is that we create these tools so we don't have to do it again. We've invented the wheel once, right? So we don't have to try to figure out how we roll around. You know, I would have, figured out the propeller blade first, but in any case, that's what's important, is that we create these automated tools that we can use that provide value, and cost savings to our clients. Like, again, that 10-year pen test is going to be expensive versus the one that's going to take me a week.
Right. Well, let's talk about the term threat hunt real quick. That sounds like a video game to me. So.
This is like a whole can of worms.
It is.
Do DevSecOps and Zero Trust and SASE and all the terms that are really just describing something.
Yeah, it does.
New.
It's like you should have a Nintendo with some plastic guns playing threat hunt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You got this morphized code running through a computer and you're shooting at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it technically is shooting at moving targets though, right?
Yeah. Well, some of the malware, some of the stories that we've been reading lately, or the news stories, some of the stuff is just, exists in memory only. There's nothing to find but traces of the fact that it's been there. That's some scary stuff out there that they've been developing from a malware perspective.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I think we'll always see this asymmetric type activity, right? Always increase in its upward evolution.
Yeah.
Because I mean, right. Because it has to, they see defenses and then they work around them based on the tools and techniques that we're using to defend.
Right.
So I think it's just an ever evolving battle, right? I mean, it's just you throw more cats and dogs in, that's all you're doing, right? It just gets bigger. It just becomes the brawl. So how do we really defend against that? And I think that's a good segue to ongoing penetration testing versus point in time, right? Which is, I think, I don't even want to dive into the threat hunt can of worms, really, because I could pull out a soapbox and a lectern and chat about this for a really long time.
You could do a whole podcast on that.
I could go weeks. I can be like a threat hunt is nothing more than a pen test on steroids. Changed my mind, right? And I would love to see what people have to say about this. But again, I believe that was a marketing term that was thrown out in order to provide a seemingly more excited response in their sales targets, right? But let's talk about what really sticks, and that's ongoing penetration testing versus point in time, right? And that's what we typically see is everybody's usually point in time, right?
Because they're box, right?
Absolutely, right. They got CIS or they have PCI or whatever, and it says you got to get a pen test done, right? So they're going to get one done once a year, and usually we find it's the end of the year, right? A month like in November. We waited all this time. Let's hurry up and get it done, right? And so they're really not looking at the intent of what a penetration test is supposed to serve you from a risk perspective, right? I mean, they're not looking at it from that perspective at all. They're just like, framework says we got to get a pen test. What's that? We got to get one, right? Do we need an automated or manual? Right. So, and that's okay, right? You're doing something, and we're never going to discredit that, right? I mean, you're doing something that's important. Do something, right? It's better than doing nothing. But a point in time pen test is never going to give you an accurate risk assessment or risk ranking on your environment as a whole, right? It's going to tell you whatever you have in scope, your one web app, maybe you got 40 and you're just like, well, we can't afford to do all 40 this year. Let's do one, right? So you're going to do one web app in one time of the year, and you're going to say, yeah, we had a pen test that, this one app was fine. Okay, well, how often is your agile sprints? How often are you making changes to that web app? There's a big difference with having ongoing risk assessment services, right? Penetration testing activities versus a point in time. And if you don't have those types of things, and you made a good point earlier, Mike, about the output of a pen test is important because it's gonna find some trivial misconfigurations on your web app as an example, right? Well, why did you deploy with these trivial misconfigurations in the first place? Are you considering this for your business? Is that okay to do? Are you saying that so we've talked about this before in other pen test episodes, right? The X-frame options headers not set is not an exploitable vulnerability in 99% of the cases you're going to find. But basic entry-level noobs in this game are going to call it out because they want to try to get a bug bounty or want to try to show them impressive on a report, right? But let's get past all that and say, why did you deploy a web application with the X-frame options header missing in the first place? Is it because you had a compensating control in the JavaScript? Or is it just because it was too hard, it required too many dev hours? There's a reason there. Or was it negligence, right? But like you said, Mike, that information can come out of that pen test and say there was no exploitable findings, right? Nothing serious, but you had some trivial things. Why did they get deployed like that? Can we go back to the document set and say in our software delivery, standard, we need to add a place for doing this type of ongoing pen test, right? Now it can just be, if you're just if you're doing right, DevSecOps, right, which is what this is, and you're like, oh, we probably should deploy code with all this crap in it. Yeah, you should probably have in the military we call it certification and accreditation. So you certify that code before it goes live. That certification process includes a pen test, right? We want to run it through some form of probably an automated scanner, right, to just determine, or something like a 3-letter, I won't use their name, but one of the 3 letters big tools that they have that they sell that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could run your code through that, right, and validate if you've made any mistakes in this change before you go live. Or you can go live to a staging environment and have a third-party pen test it. Right? There's a million ways to do this process, but that's the benefit of ongoing activities. You don't have to call it an ongoing pen test, right? No one's going to come in and just threat hunt for the rest of your life, right? To throw the tiki terms around. But pen test-like processes can be built in and baked into your everyday operations so that you are conducting seemingly ongoing campaigns.
And the other thing too is the cleanup from the find. Why do you still have SSL 2.0 out acceptable? I mean, why is that protocol even still running? Where you can accept those. Why is it still being found in the scan? Why is SSL 3.0 still being found? Why is that stuff and not cleaned up? Right. And go back to trivial configuration. So you find this stuff and then you don't fix it. Well, it only takes 15 minutes to make that change. Well, so make the change, right? So
what's the document say? And I want to ask a lot of it, it's not our place right at the time to, obviously, right. But in my head, I'm thinking I want to ask the client, what does your data set or your data standards say about having these types of vulnerabilities? Is it okay to use, what does your encryption policy say? Is it okay to use SSL version 2 and version 3?
Right.
Is that still acceptable for your business? Right. And I already know the argument for some organizations. They're like, well, we have clients that have older machines and they might not be able to connect to our application, right? So that's always their reason for leaving those opening. However, I will tell you that all modern browsers, anybody who's not using a Windows XP machine from 2002 and is on a modern browser, Chrome, Firefox, doesn't matter, right? The Safari, they're all going to prefer a PKI modernized approved security connection. They're always going to approve that over something weird. You know what I mean? So again, we have that conversation with older versions of TLS and SSL and older versions of your connection oriented methodologies too. And it's it shouldn't. A great example, 80 and 443. People leave 80 open and they're like, well, we redirect to 443. What browser in the last 5 years is ever gonna not warn you when you connect to a web application over port 80? It's gonna say you can't go here. This is bad. There's no security. You can't go to this website. And so I don't understand the argument, right, based on modern technology.
Well, isn't it that Microsoft came out with that Edge because they sundown IE that their Edge won't even connect to port 80 anymore, or they're moving to that in some way?
Sure.
Literally, I mean, even if port 80 is open, traffic is allowed, it still won't allow it to connect.
Sometimes you do hear the company's justification is, oh, well, we have 3 clients that are still using AOL, whatever, and they're worried about.
I'm one of them.
I mean, it's almost at that point, it's almost like, well, send them all new laptops and get them on a new browser, and it would be cheaper to do that than suffering,
I'm guessing they're not your high-dollar clients.
What's that?
I'm guessing they're not your high-dollar clients. If they're it's kind of like you can use a war analogy, because North Korea still uses biplanes. We shouldn't send F-22s to South Korea. So
it's crazy, but that's you hear it, I think, a little too often. That we our clients have these old browsers. We're worried about them being able to connect.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, that's.
We ran into that at a place where there was a lot of customer-facing websites, right, where they would be able to get quotes for different things, and it's like, well, we don't know what the end users are using, and we can't control people, and it's like, well, at a certain point, you have to protect the house, right? Mm-hmm. Your 16-year-old son keeps forgetting his keys. It doesn't mean you leave the door unlocked every night.
That's a great analogy, man. That's perfect, actually.
Well,
that's perfect.
If we all join the same team and everybody gets their systems right, and then all these people on deprecated systems will be forced to upgrade because they won't be able to do anything they're trying to do, and then the world will be a better place for
a while, for about 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. So to circle back, right? I hate to ruin the the rhetoric because I'm having a great time, but I know everybody was like, well, what's the point? Well, the point is that ongoing is going to be point in time any day of the week. our recommendation is you should have a third party doing, manual and automated penetration testing at least quarterly, right? You should have a third party looking at your stuff quarterly if you really want to understand what your risk footprint is. And Mike's going to jump in any minute and say, and internal penetration testing too, because we see everybody skip out on that.
Yep.
And everybody skips on that.
And after every major release.
Yep. And of all the, you just gave that headline of all those billions of records that have been leaked. And I want to tell you something, okay? All of the information that everybody needs to break into your organization is probably out there in pieces. Okay. What you're up against is the time window. Okay.
Right.
That data is so vast to look through right now. That's what takes time. It's like the proverbial needle in a haystack. The needle's there. We know it's there. It's a matter of the time it takes to dig for it. Right. And so that is what you're up against with all of these records that are now out there in mass. They are there for everybody to look at, everybody to gain information on. That's going to contain password hashes, common passwords, email addresses, right? They're going to have a lot of stuff about your organization that's there. It might be old, but you need to ask yourself, is that time window that you're up against worth having the uptick in cybersecurity, related tasks? And you don't have to hire that third party. Okay. There's a book that I know a couple smart guys and one dude with a beard wrote. It's the least of the three, but in any case, you can get that book and it'll tell you about all this stuff that you can put in your everyday operations processes to simulate a lot of this work and reduce your risk quite efficiently and cheaply.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, another thing too that I think is forgotten a lot is as people start to go back to offices, don't forget about your wireless environment too.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be one of the weakest points of an office environment, at least from what we've seen in testing that we've done with clients. So don't forget about that. If you're still running WEP, it's time to upgrade.
Yeah, because you might have clients with older laptops that don't use
Yeah, right.
If you're still running the WAP, you need to just grab your WAPs, put them in a box, send them back to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Go practice the phrase, do you want fries with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Time to work off only fax machines moving forward.
Yeah.
Well, this has been good. I hope everybody learned a lot. There's a lot to unpack when it comes to pen testing and a lot of misconceptions and confusion out there. So our goal was to help remediate some of that. If you're looking for some more information, check out NIST. 800-115 is the penetration test methodology recommended. So it doesn't have to get too fancy. I mean, you can kind of see the fundamentals of these activities and how they work through a industry accepted standard with NIST. And that'll help you gain a better understanding. But just know that penetration testing is important. If you learned one thing out of this little series here, it's something that everybody should be doing. It's critical to understand your real risk, right? So you might do a cyber risk assessment against a framework like NIST or CIS controls, but that's not going to do it, right? I mean, just because it's in writing and people say that they're doing something doesn't mean that the attacker from the outside doesn't see things entirely different. So that said, any final thoughts?
Well, just remember that the attacker out there has nothing better to do all day but figure out how to attack you. So if you get to a static point and you think, all right, we're secure, you're not. You're secure at that point, but unless you continue to evolve, remember the enemy's always going to evolve. So you have to keep that in mind as you move forward. There's no, all right, we've achieved everything. It doesn't happen. So
Doesn't happen. Nope. It's sandcastles, man. It's sandcastles on the beach, right? Mm-hmm. The waves are coming. You gotta have to reinforce the castle,
right?
Or the water's going to take it away.
Yeah.
Well, good stuff. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Please subscribe to the podcast, rate us, let us know your comments, reach out. Would love to hear from you. We're always looking for new topics that you care about and That's what's most important. So hope this helped you out, and check out cyberrants.com if you haven't already. There's some information about the book and such, and podcast episodes are also on our website at silentsector.com. Have a great day.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.